A new series of Nature begins next Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock here on Radio 4. Time now for a new series of The Bottom Line. Evan Davis and guests discuss how to make money in the sharing economy.
Hello and welcome to the programme. Now, consumers in the developed world have all got rather used to owning things. Homes, cars, clothes, you name it, they buy it. And even if they don't buy it, they might rent it from a big company in the business of renting. Today, though, we're going to look at an alternative model. Collaborative consumption, it's sometimes called, or sharing. Often, in reality, it's about us renting our possessions out to each other. Well, some people think it's really beginning to take off. We'll be discussing it with three enthusiasts, and we'll see why some people are perhaps fighting against it. But let's start by spending a few minutes meeting each of my three guests, all representing companies in the area of facilitating sharing. Now, the oldest of the three companies is LiftShare. Ali Klaban, you founded that company right back in 1997, so that's before we even had an internet, virtually.
It was pretty much, yes.
Yeah. So what do you do?
We very simply match people who are travelling in the same direction so they can share a car, whether it's sharing a car to get to work or going to a festival or going to an event. We very simply match people who are going the same way.
Right. But you've got two business models in your business, so I think you need to tell us what the difference between them is and which one makes money and which one doesn't.
Okay, so when we set LiftShare up, any member of the public could go on there and say they're travelling from London to Bristol or wherever they were going, and you could find a match. The challenge was we couldn't run a business that way.
Now, why couldn't you run a business that way? That's quite simple.
Because we were matching people together, but there was no financial transaction for us.
They were paying each other?
They were
but you just weren't able to get your hands on the cash?
Yes, so when I set it up, it was for students sharing cars to go to university. And then we had a stroke of fortune one year when Glastonbury contacted us saying that they were having a bit of trouble getting so many people down to Glastonbury without annoying the council because they had such bad congestion. And so we set them up with a branded version of the LiftShare site that we had to help people share cars to get to Glastonbury. And it was a great success.
So it was a Glastonbury LiftShare scheme,
yes.
But you were doing the back office work.
We were basically running the lift sharing scheme for them, and they were promoting out to their 100,000 people going to the festival. So for us, it was a great way to properly promote the service. And we soon started getting phone calls from people who had gone to Glastonbury saying, could you run something similar for our company? And we had approaches from companies in London and Bristol and Norfolk saying, could you run a car sharing scheme for our company? And that's where the money comes from.
And that's the model. So basically employers come to you and say, we want a lift share scheme, ride share as others would say, and then you can organise it for them. And why wouldn't the employer just do it themselves? I mean, we're talking big employers here.
If you're a huge company, you don't need to widen out. But if you're a small company, then you do. And so we run just under 1,000 schemes across the UK for some of the UK's biggest corporates, but also down to very small companies who either have got a parking issue or are struggling to get people into their place of work.
OK, so just give us an idea of the scale. How many rides a year are shared via LiftShare?
OK, so in a year, we probably have about 10 million rides.
OK, that's non-negligible.
A year. Yeah. In fact, no, that's incorrect. In a month, we have...
This isn't Dragon's Den, but I'm expecting you to know the figures better than this.
I'm trying to think. In a typical month, we have over 1 million shares, so it's about 12 million a year. So we've probably, since LiftShare's been going, because it's scaling up now, we've probably had about 50 million shares.
Next in chronological terms is Airbnb. Now, this is the one that I think most people would associate with the sharing economy. And the country manager for the UK and Ireland is Evan Hegarness, the first Evan on this programme, other than me, I think, Evan. And this was founded, 10 years after LiftShare, 2008. It was set up. Just give us a little story, the story of the origin.
The founding story is quite interesting because two of our three founders, back in 2008, they faced the problem. And the problem was that they didn't have enough money to pay their rent. So they were sitting there and figuring out, what do we do? They were both just recent design graduates, and there was a big design conference taking place in San Francisco where they lived. And they came up with, we have some airbeds, so we're going to create this website called Airbed and Breakfast. And today we're in more than 175 countries around the world, have more than 500,000 properties on our site in more than 40,000 cities worldwide.
So essentially, if I have a spare room or a spare house, I can put it onto your site. If I'm looking for one, I can put it onto your site.
Exactly.
You're going to charge some fee for me using Airbnb as the finder's fee?
So our business model is that we're charging a fee from both the guest and the host. From the guest, we're charging between 6 and 12%, and also always from the host, we charge 3%. On average, we get about 10% per booking.
Give us an idea then of the scale of Airbnb.
So we recently reached 10 million book nights or 10 million guests, and 6 million alone was in 2013.
Now, what's the constraint on the size? Do you have more people looking for accommodation? As presumably you do. And is the problem always trying to get people to rent out their places, and you always have people looking and there aren't enough?
Since we're in so many different countries around the world, this will differ from region to region. We have places where we need more supply and other places we need more people searching. It's going a bit up and down, but we face different challenges in different parts of the world.
Let's move on to our third business. This is much younger. And Fiona Dizegni is with us, the founder of Rendez-vous. Is that the right
Yes,
way
you
of
say it
saying
in
it?
a very French
in
way.
the French way, Rendez-vous. It's a company very much in its early days. You tell us what it's trying to do, Fiona.
Yeah, so basically we are a peer-to-peer and designer fashion rental marketplace. So we allow women to rent clothes to one another and rent designers' creations, basically. So I came up with the idea with the fact that I always find that I have too many clothes in my wardrobe but nothing to wear, and I realized that was the case of every woman basically. And from the statistic, basically we don't wear 70% of our clothes, so basically it was a huge waste in a wardrobe.
So you see, I would have thought the competition to renting out would be to just sell it on another big auction site, for example, where you would just sell a second-hand thing.
Yes.
Renting, does it work? Have you actually managed to get it working yet?
Yeah, so basically we are the first doing peer-to-peer renting, so it's a challenge to make people understand like the value of it, but basically by testing it through our events, because basically we do events every month in London and Paris, we allow people to understand the value, which is actually going further than just renting a piece of clothes, because it's also to connect through this piece of clothes.
Right. I mean, I have to admit, lift sharing, I get, that existed before the internet. I mean, the internet makes it easier, doesn't it? House sharing, that I can also understand. Clothes, there's something just a tiny bit more personal about clothes.
Yes, definitely.
It's a bit more awkward because they may not fit.
Yeah.
Someone goes to the party in the clothes. I can imagine the clothes not coming back in quite the state they left. All sorts of problems I can imagine in this.
Yeah,
in this
you're
model.
right. I think we are going into a more emotional kind of exchange, basically. You are going to rent like a place or like a car because you can't afford it. In the term of clothes, it's all about the fact that fashion is changing every time and you don't want to wear the same things every day. But we don't need to overconsume. We don't need to buy, basically.
And the customer experience is I get the thing clean and I hand it back dry cleaned, basically.
Yes, so basically we have partnership with some dry cleaners, local partnerships today in London and Paris, and we also have deposit.
Yours is more local, but Airbnb is clearly, you might be renting an apartment from someone in Bangkok if you're living in New York, but yours, it's really around local communities of women.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, but we have a global vision, basically. This conception of fashion can be shared everywhere.
Okay, well, we've got the measure of all your businesses. I'm interested in whether you see yourselves as commercial businesses or something a little different, something, I don't know, around the lifestyle, around the ethos of sharing. I mean,
definitely for LiveShare, when I set it up, I set it up to solve my own social problem in the fact that I couldn't afford to get back from university. So I set it up for a personal reason, and then it was trying to find out how to spread it around. So it was a very social thing of going around other universities, encouraging it there. And you start getting into the whole understanding of how wonderful sharing is. And then suddenly you start realising actually sharing is not only wonderful from a social point of view, it's an environmental thing and it's a financial thing. And whichever way you look at it, it's a win-win. And there are so many benefits to sharing that it is almost impossible to be in the sharing economy and look at yourself as a normal corporate financially based business, because the benefits are far greater than any financial benefit you can bring.
Yeah, I think I have to second you that, Ally, because a lot of people, they sign up on Airbnb because they want to make some extra money. But then we see that they stay on because of the experience. It's more about access today than ownership. If you go just, a couple of decades back, we all wanted to buy a car and, buy all this and buy all of that. But now it's more accessing things. And with the technology today, we made it possible. It's more accessible.
This is really interesting, though, isn't it? Because I wonder whether we aren't instinctively people who do like to own things, and whether actually often it's more about the owning. I don't really care what it is. I just want that sense of possession.
I think that's changing massively.
Do you?
I mean, pretty much, look ahead 10 years' time, all you need to own is a mobile phone. that will give you access to everything you need.
People love to own their own home, don't they? There's a sort of people. It's more than just a financial thing. It's that they feel it's their own.
There are certain things and certain different people, but the young we're seeing coming through now, the way they view things is really different, but it isn't limited to the young. I mean, you go back 50 years ago, sharing was commonplace.
I just wonder whether, in the old days, sharing was a substitute because you couldn't afford to do something different, and nowadays people can afford to own.
It's a choice, basically. I really think it's become more and more a choice, like that you feel more part of this kind of values because you actually realize you can get more than just the product itself.
And I think we do have to make a change on how we consume. I think, there's a limited amount of resources on this planet. And if we keep on spending, or you can even say wasting the resources as we're doing today, there won't be too many generations after us that can experience this planet the way it is today. Yeah. So we need to make a change on how
we haven't got a choice. The three options are to reduce the population, to use less, or to share more.
And let's just be clear, because you're all giving very noble views of what your business is about. You'd all love to make some money out of this, right? I mean, if you can float the businesses and make millions, that would be fine, or is that not part of the game plan?
When I look, Liveshare's gone through 15 years and there have been ups and downs. I mean, within a year we were offered a lot of money for it, and it's like, what would you invest in? Airbnb's gone down the investment route. We've always tried to be self-financing. We don't want to be pulled by venture capitalists in terms of saying you will only look after the sector of the market that makes money. We are there as a free service available for everyone. We've got people who have no access to jobs because they can't afford to travel, and we're not going to just focus on the long one-off trips where we could take a cut. We are purely about trying to ensure that everyone's got someone to share a car with.
But Airbnb is very profitable, isn't it, Evan?
What we have in, the middle of our business is always the experiences. An Airbnb story, a family in Copenhagen, the mom in the house said that you can come and book, but you need to spend at least an hour with my kids. And I was thinking, maybe you want a free babysitter, but fine. And I spent an hour with their kids, and they asked me all these questions: what football team I liked, and what food I like eating, what do I do for work. And then the mom in the house told me that we have 30 guests in our house, and every single guest I tell to spend time with my kids. And I was thinking, like, wow, this is so much bigger than just the roof over your head. Because, of course, these kids are more open-minded. They have more knowledge. And I think a lot of the bad things that are happening in the world is because we're afraid, because we don't know about the unknown.
It is a commercial organisation. I mean, it's not a charity.
Yeah, of course.
It's not
we have
a
massive organisation behind making this possible. It wouldn't be possible without this organisation. But again, our community is in the centre, and that's what we care about.
Yeah. Okay, now the issues around making enough money to cover your costs and maybe even do better than that. You had problems, Ali, in the early days because you found that they were paying each other, the two people who were sharing.
Yeah. I mean, our business
but you couldn't get a bit of it.
Our business model day one, the first Freshers' Fair we went to when we launched, we were charging people £10 to join. Join up with Liveshare, we'll help you travel the country. And we charged £10, we had about 5 people join. We made it £5 and we had about 10 people join, and at lunchtime it became free and we had 50 people join. It's like, ching, it's got to be free. So free was the way, and we went around other Freshers' Fairs and we did the same thing. We had hundreds of people join all over the place, but we had no financial model. So I had to go and work in post rooms, in pubs, in wherever I could to get the money to basically get the website developed. And it took 3 years before we got our first contract. But in those 3 years, it is amazing when you have got no money, how much you learn. So I was going and talking to thousands and thousands of people about why they would share, how they're using the internet, what would motivate them, what marketing to do. So when we actually finally got contracts, we were able to scale very fast.
Very fast. Well, you did very well because you basically adapted to find a monetary model.
Yeah.
Did you have any problems with Airbnb? It's not a membership model, yours, is it? You just pay per transaction.
Yeah, you pay per booking.
And did you look at a membership model where it became Club Airbnb?
No, we want to make this as open as possible for users, so that's not something we've considered.
How about you, Fiona, on the revenue side?
So we already charge our user for a fee when renting happen, basically. And we also integrate some emerging designers for them to rent their creations. So basically, they pay us to get access to the community.
So what would I be paying for a rental? Design address or something like that?
So basically, it's about 20% of the purchasing price for the rental, and we take 20% of the fee. Yeah, exactly. And for the designers, it's 30%.
So you're taking 4% of the purchase price.
Yes, and also for the designers, we have kind of a logic which is really to promote them. So basically, if people want to buy them after having rented it, they can. So basically, it's a different way as well to test before buying.
I think one of the biggest financial challenges to this market, though, is taking the middleman transaction. If, say, I'm giving someone a lift from Bristol to London, it's £10. If I, as the organisation who makes that match, wants to take a cut of that, you say, well, what's reasonable? 10%, 20%, say 10%. So that's £1 we would get for making that match. Once you've gone through the thing of that money going through a merchant service through a bank, they take their percentage. And then when you pay that money out, when you then pay that money out to that person, they take a percentage again. For every pound we take in, it could be 60p goes to the bank. So we would get 40p, and of that, we've got to run the whole site and deal with any noise. So it's really hard. When you've got bigger transactions, say £100 for a room for a night, it is worth spending 2.5% on that. But when it's smaller transactions, for small-term rentals, renting anything else you've got, it's really hard to act as a middleman. So we found, for our business, acting as a middleman wouldn't really work unless you were doing very long one-off trips.
So Airbnb's bill, your customers are spending more each time they...
Yeah,
I
think,
so
the house, people's homes is their most valuable asset. So, of course, you can probably make more money on that than renting out the car or dress.
There's an old phrase, no one ever washed a rental car, implying, obviously, that you don't take as much care of other people's possessions as you might of your own. How much of this has been a problem? Airbnb, I mean, there have been complaints about people whose flats or apartments that don't come back in the state they left them, or there was one, I think, in Glendale in... Southern California, where a house was just being used as a kind of party venue and being rented out. What proportion of your rentals end up problematic in some way?
So, as I said, we've reached 10 million guests, and we've had a handful incidents, but this is not, a huge thing. If it would, we would never have gone to this size. Yeah. We have about 40 safety features on our site. We educate and encourage our community to communicate as much upfront, ask questions of why are you coming, why did you pick my place. People online verify themselves, they offline verify themselves, and we communicate as much upfront.
And you can sort of tell somebody, or quite a lot about somebody, from communicating with them.
The strength of the sharing economy is that it's built on trust, and trust is kind of being brought back to life.
Do you all feel that is a sort of social plus of the whole thing?
Yeah.
You feel good because you're trusting, and then you're trusted, and if it pays off, it kind of
definitely.
gives you a bonus.
I've used Airbnb, and the fact that when you go to stay with someone, I turned up with a bottle of wine because I wanted that person to do a nice rating about me. So when I next wanted to go and stay with someone, they'd say he's a great guest. You are nicer than you would normally be. And if I was staying in a hotel,
you don't give a bottle of wine at a hotel.
No, you
certainly people treat private homes and private cars in a different way. That it was a huge corporation that we're renting from.
One thing in your favour, each of you is running a kind of natural monopoly, aren't you? I mean, or are there lots of Airbnbs? Airbnb seems to be the one which people go to if they want to rent out their room or rent someone else's room.
They've bought most of their competitors, I think.
Right, so there were others. But it does seem like that makes sense, because if you have 30 of these things, then obviously you've diffracted the market.
We see that as we grow, of course, there are more and more competitors out there trying to do, what we do. It's a huge market. But we always, keep focus on developing our service to always, be innovative and, be entrepreneurs.
But Evan, if I want to go and rent a room, I want to go to a place that's got a lot of choice and a lot of rooms, and it'll have the one on the date and the place and the location I want, which the big one is more likely to have rather than the small one. So it is very hard to enter the market, isn't it? I would have thought, anyway.
Yeah, and I think that, we have private people running their micro businesses on our site, and they see that, go on Airbnb, that's where we can get the demand, and that's why they keep coming back to us.
You've got competition, haven't you, I think, Ali? There is lift share competition.
There is competition. I mean, in the UK, we've got probably 80% of the market. So as a critical mass, we've got it. The interesting thing now in the marketplace is they're coming with big backing. So they're spending a huge amount on advertising. So if you go on the internet and type in lift share, you'll see 3 brands ahead of ours, even though it's...
What are those 3 brands?
Our brand. Well, there's BlaBlaCar from France, Carpooling from Germany, and within London there are National Car Share, there's another one, there's Go Car Share locally.
But my prediction would be that they won't all stay in the market, because I think because they'll consolidate, because it doesn't make sense to have the market.
There'll definitely be consolidation.
Let me just remind everyone, you're listening to a discussion about what we call the sharing economy. It's not sharing, it's more renting, really, but it's renting and sharing on the web. And this is the bottom line. And with me are Ali Clabban from LiftShare, Evan Hegenes from Airbnb, and Fiona Desenyi from Rendezvous, a clothes renting sharing facility. We've talked about some of the things that make this market work, right? Essentially, you're taking unused assets and you're putting them to use, aren't you? Whether it's a designer dress or an empty room or an empty seat in a car. Is some of the value of what you're doing undercutting regulation and rules that would apply and impose standards on professional corporate providers of the services you're competing with? So let's take, for example, Airbnb. Hotels have to meet all sorts of environmental safety standards, fire safety standards, catering cleanliness standards. There are all sorts of things they have to meet, right? To what extent, Evan, is Airbnb just able to get where it is because it doesn't have to face all those standards?
So first of all, I think that a lot of tech companies popping up today, brand new business models, the technology we have today, we didn't have X amount of years ago when a lot of the laws that we're facing today was, created. So we're spending a lot of our time working with stakeholders and regulators all over the world, educating them about our business model, what we're doing, and trying to find a way where we can work together.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't like Airbnb. I mean, a lot of policymakers don't like it, do they?
Of course, we have someone that is seeing Airbnb as a threat. And I think that what we offer compared to some of our competitors is completely different. Staying in someone's private home is completely different from actually staying in a hotel. More than 80% of our hosts are private people renting out their primary residence. So that's the big majority of our...
Now, what proportion, Evan, of the people renting out, of those 80% of ordinary people renting out their home, what proportion of them do you think are paying tax on the income they derive?
So we require every single host on our site to follow the rules and regulation in the area where they're living, including paying taxes. We are encouraging by sending out tax forms.
Do you inform the tax authorities as to who has rented out a room on your...
That's we're following the rules and regulations in those cities where they're based.
So if the British tax authorities, for example, said to you, can you give us a list of everybody who's rented out a room so we can collect the tax?
We're not sharing any data.
You're not sharing the data, no. Because there must be a suspicion that, I mean, in your one, Ali, do you think they pay tax on the income they derive?
They don't make a profit. The difference with LiveShare to most of the challenging ones now are that very early on, we looked into the insurance issues, and there were a few insurance companies who said we won't let people share cars. So we got them to basically change their policies to clarify they will let people share cars as long as they don't make profit. So as long as you don't make a profit from giving someone a lift, you're not seen as hire and reward, and therefore you're not in the taxi.
You're defraying some of the cost you had from the...
Exactly. And some of our members will be saving, and we've got people saving £4,000, £5,000, £6,000 a year. There's one guy who's even set up a website that shows exactly how much money he's saving, so he can show the taxman that he isn't making a profit.
Do any of you think the sector has grown as fast and as quickly as it has because it does allow some circumvention of things like taxes and regulations that might otherwise be...
I would say that's true. What's happened is regulations come in to reduce risk or whatever, and it has stopped a lot of sharing going on. And businesses have been set up within that regulation, whether it's sharing taxis, whether it's hotels, they've all run normal businesses. Now the world is changing fast, and the regulators are struggling to keep up with it. Yeah. The challenge is whether it's wrong to disrupt things and break the rules, or whether it is worth breaking those rules. And in many circumstances, the rules have stopped people from sharing lives, using goods really efficiently, and that's got to be changed.
So if the regulation is stopping sharing, it's the regulation that's wrong rather than the sharing that's wrong, I suppose your point.
Yes.
In France, they've been quite negative about it, I think, haven't they?
So basically, there is kind of a war now with taxi drivers in France, in Paris, and in Lyon. Basically, there were like dozens of incidents recently because the traditional taxi drivers basically don't accept the fact that online and mobile taxi drivers company could get customer easier. So taxi driver vandalized the app taxi drivers, basically.
What, physically vandalized?
Physically vandalized. And so it really showed that there is like kind of upheaval in a way in France based on the fact that new models are disrupting traditional.
So a lot of ill feeling then, really, to the disruptors.
Yeah, and I think that people are kind of freaking out.
Which, Evan, is the jurisdiction which has been most negative about Airbnb? Because there have been problems here and there.
So now I'm based in the UK, but I'm sure you've seen that we've been facing some issues in New York. There was a case with the guy renting out, and he was fined breaking some zoning regulations.
Zoning regulations. So he's running something that looks like a hotel in an area where there was no license.
He was renting out the private room in his residence. And we appealed, and we are working very closely with the regulators in New York to find out how we can work together.
But you won the appeal.
We won the appeal.
But it must be pretty annoying for you because you're in 170 countries and each of them has their own view about what's allowed and what isn't allowed and what...
Yeah, but isn't that the beauty with the world, that things are different everywhere?
Where does this sharing economy go? What are the limits? Is there a lot of entrepreneurial activity in this area? We've got you, Fiona, you're obviously the upstart in the room here. Are there lots of others? You're in Shoreditch in London, Tech City they call it. Are you the only one there in this space, or are there lots?
Yeah, they are. I must say that in France as well, there is this global movement that has been born in France called WeShare. That is actually like the kind of organization that represents sharing economy. So it's really important in France, but also here, new companies trying to go into this field, and a lot about sustainable fashion. But I think what is really interesting is that we bring value as well to traditional companies, and that's something that is not really seen yet. But basically, I think that we change a model and we actually create value for these companies as well.
So I'm not quite sure I understand why you would be better at that. Well, you were agreeing, Ali, but
I agree because of the conversations. I look at, say we're working with corporates, we've got some of the biggest corporates in the country, lift share schemes. They set it up normally to reduce parking. But the feedback we get saying we've now got a senior director sharing with someone on the shop floor, they're talking every day going to work. The silos they're breaking down, getting sharing into the heart of some of these bigger companies is disrupting them in ways that was never possible before.
I want to ask you whether you think big companies, how do they respond to this movement that you're obviously all very passionate about and feel very committed to? Do they co-opt it? Do they fight it? Do they join it? I mean, what do you see their responses being, and what would be your advice to the established players?
The bright ones are embracing it. I mean, there's great hits like Marks and Spencer's and their swapping. You've got Avis, who bought Zipcar for a lot of money. I think they saw it potentially as a threat, so they're diversifying their portfolio by bringing that under their umbrella. They have to embrace it, but embrace it with care, but understanding that it will disrupt what they're doing. But if they don't do it, other people will do it.
I think the challenges are all the same for everyone. We are lacking in resources, and I think that all the traditional companies will have the same challenge, and they will have to adapt to new models for that as well.
Come on, tell us what you would do if you were running a big hotel chain now, Evan.
No, I think I like to, when I talk about disruption, I also like to think of that as progress. And in the world I'm from, there's space for everyone. We're offering completely different things, and at the end, that will be better for the consumer.
Well, look, thank you all very much for sharing your thoughts with us. Ali Clubben of LiftShare, Evan Hegenes of Airbnb, and Fiona Dizeny of Rentez-vous if you want to be more French. Do visit our website, bbc.co.uk/bottomline. Details of how to download the programme there. Otherwise, I'll be back with more guests next week.
That was Evan Davis. The producer was Rosamund Jones. The Bottom Line is produced in conjunction with the Open University, and next week the topic for discussion will be the business of business schools. Is an MBA worth it? Neanderthal interbreeding and a quicker way to produce stem cells are discussed on Inside Science after the news.
The cost of home care for the elderly and vulnerable is being driven down.
They were given reduced funds, 5% less every year, and they were supposed to make amends for this with economies.
Sadly, we're unable to provide care through the local authority because they won't pay us the rates that we know we need to charge to deliver quality care.
BBC Radio 4 investigates the state of home care.